The honourable member for Thornhill.
Are at historic lows. That was the Prime Minister just 3 years ago. He told people to keep borrowing while his government kept spending. Now, the number of Canadians saying they're facing financial stress has jumped 20% in a single year. The National Payroll Institute found that 63% of working Canadians said they had nothing left at the end of the month, and 30% spend more than they make. They are calling it a national emergency. So when will they finally balance the budget so interest rates can come down and Canadians can keep more of their own money?
Mr. Speaker, in my first answer, let me just congratulate you in this historic role, historic for Canada. Mr. Speaker, while the Conservatives recite trite and misleading talking points, our government is acting for Canadians. With Bill C-56, we are getting more homes built by lifting the GST on purpose-built rental, and we are acting to stabilize grocery prices with historic changes to competition law that will bring competition to the grocery sector.
Député de Thornhill.
This is the minister who misled Canadians when she said that interest rates would stay low for a long time, and now homeowners are bracing for the shock of when they have to renew their mortgages. That's what the Canadian banks are saying. And now there's another former bank governor raising alarm bells. David Dodge warns that the burden of past debts are catching up. Governments cannot spend their way out of the problems that she created. When the government spends money, the bank raises the interest rates, and when the rates go up, Canadians pay more for their mortgages. So will the NDP Liberal government finally listen to everyone or anyone, stop their spending so that Canadians can keep their homes?
Ministre des Finances et vice-premier ministre.
Mr. Speaker, the only people misleading Canadians are the Conservatives on that side of the House. The reality is Canada has the lowest deficit in the G7 and the lowest debt to GDP ratio. And, Mr. Speaker, our AAA rating has recently been reaffirmed by DBRS Morningstar. These are independent experts, Mr. Speaker, not Conservative partisans. We know we need to get more homes built. That's why we've lifted the GST on purpose-built rental and added another $20 billion to the financing CMHC has available for rental construction.
L'honorable député de Calgary Forest Lawn.
Canadians shouldn't have believed this finance minister when she said borrow as much as you want. Interest rates will be low for a very long time, because she turned around and threw hundreds of billions of dollars of fuel on the inflationary fire, giving Canadians the worst inflation in 40 years and the most rapid interest rate hikes not seen in the last 30 years. Anyone who took out a mortgage 5 years ago at 2% will now have to renew at 6 or 7%. That's an increase of more than 200%. Will this Prime Minister rein in his inflationary deficits so interest rates come down, or does he want people to start losing their homes?
Hear, hear.
L'honorable ministre.
Mr. Speaker, yet again, misleading comments from the Conservatives. The reality is Canada's AAA rating has been reaffirmed year after year that we have been in government. We have the lowest deficit in the G7 and the lowest debt to GDP ratio. We also know we are a growing country, and a growing country needs to build more homes faster. That is exactly what we are doing by lifting the GST on purpose-built rental, by making more financing available through CMHC, $200 billion for $20 billion for financing of new rental construction.
L'honorable député de Calgary Forest Lawn.
The rating she brags about came at the high cost of 1 in 5 Canadians skipping meals and 7 million Canadians visiting a food bank in a single month. She's completely out of touch, but in line with her incompetent government's legacy. This finance minister was doing victory laps 2 months ago, saying that she stopped inflation. It went up 43% since then. What did she think was going to happen when she added $1.2 billion of debt in the first quarter of this fiscal year alone? Will the Prime Minister rein in his inflationary spending, or does he think that too is not one of his responsibilities?
L'honorable ministre des Finances et vice-premier ministre.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are hitting new lows in this question period. Not only are they misleading, they are internally contradictory and incomprehensible. I think the member opposite just said that our AAA rating is disadvantageous to hardworking Canadians. I beg to differ, Mr. Speaker. Our AAA rating is a foundation for everything our government is doing to build more homes, to provide more support to hard-working Canadian middle-class families, Mr. Speaker. Time for the Conservatives to get that.
The honourable member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, according to a recent survey by the National Payroll Institute, nearly 2 out of 3 workers spend their entire take-home pay, and 30% are spending more than that. But we can help them by rejecting the second carbon tax, a tax that applies in Quebec and is supported by the Bloc. People are suffering and having trouble putting food on the table. It's a serious situation. Will the Prime Minister revisit his commitment to raise the carbon tax radically as the Bloc would have it? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to remind my honourable colleague that during the last election campaign, his party and those elected in his party campaigned in favor of a price on pollution. They just talk and we take action. That's the difference. And those taxes will help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and those reductions will also generate investments of over $2 billion all across the country. That's the difference between us and them, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, when you talk about out of touch, that's what we're talking about. This minister is completely out of touch with what life is like for people who are going to food banks. Food banks are overwhelmed. People can't get enough to eat. There are families in Montreal in his riding that have been turned away by the food banks because they didn't have enough food to provide. And unfortunately, this government and the Bloc supported the government in increasing the carbon tax. Will this government put aside its ideology and, for once, and help people in need? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, what's out of touch in 2023 is a party that aspires to form government and doesn't have any policy on climate change. The official position of that party today is to deny the very existence of climate change. And yet this summer there were hundreds of people displaced all over the country, sometimes not just once or twice, but 3 times because of record forest fires. There have been incredible floods all across the country, and the Conservatives have nothing to say about climate change.